The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brad Spates with Guide Technologies, and thank you for joining us for our part two of our four-part Cloud Suite Industrial series on Infor OS. Pat Armour will be driving the show this afternoon, and he'll be talking about workflows and monitors and how to streamline your organization. With that, everybody will be on mute, and so if you have any questions, please use the question or the chat feature, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the session. With that, thank you, Pat. Here you go.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks, Brad. So go through a couple things just to refresh. If some of you were on the last of the webinar series, great. If not, just to kind of recap, we went over really all of the features inside of iOS, and specifically today we want to talk directly about Ion, which is basically the integration piece to the whole platform. So what it allows us to do is to use event management, connect with APIs, pass XML documents, all kinds of good stuff that we can do with inside that piece of the application. And that's what we're gonna go through. It really gives us one single point to do connections. Now, we're kind of spoiled in CSI or Sightline land because we've kind of already probably done a lot of that, or your partner may have, or you have inside of Mongoose, right? So when I say event management here, I'm talking about Infor's specific event management for Ion, not event management for CSI. So there's event management in CSI, and we'll see how they interact between the two, how you can call one and the other. And the other thing not to think about is that in Mongoose, right, we can do REST services, API calls from IDOs and everything that way, right? So again, we are kind of spoiled. So you'll say, well, why does this Ion exist? And for us, and well, the reality is, right, this is a whole framework around all their ERPs. So you go to M3, they didn't have that capability. They're not on Mongoose and other applications like that. So, but what you'll see today, hopefully, is that it does give us one central point to do a lot of different connections. And we'll talk about those. So just to talk about jargon. So when we talk about Ion, right, that's our intelligent network. CSI obviously is Cloud Suite Industrial, the rebranded name of Sightline. Hopefully everyone's familiar with APIs, but that's the basically the standard for doing calls between, talking between solutions. We're going to talk about BODs, which are business object documents. And that's really what we're doing with Ion. Is in most cases we're doing document flows, so we're passing XML documents back and forth. And syncing them and calling other applications or our own application or other Infor applications. Today is not supposed to be training, okay? There's tons of training out there. If you guys want to get started, obviously you can come to us. There's lots of guides on Infor Campus. There's all kinds of places that you can get started on really digging into how to do this. So it's not that. I just want to kind of make you all think about, okay, how could I use this to streamline? What are some real use cases or examples if you're not using it as to why you might use it? Because that always comes up. It's like, well, this is great and all, but I already have emails. I already have AES. What do I need this for? And I think you'll see there's a lot of power behind that inside of this too. Okay, so primarily we're going to talk about Ion, and inside of Ion, we're going to talk about monitors and workflows. Okay, so let's get connected here. Okay. So for those of you who don't use any of the iOS or the interface, this is CSI, right, inside of the Mingle application. So you'll notice this black bar up here. This is all the Mingle stuff that we can do because we're inside the framework. All right, so this just kind of runs inside of it. Whereas if you're running the standard web client, you wouldn't have the Mingle bar up here, and you wouldn't have the app switcher and such. But everything that you want to do with inside Ion, whether it be connection points, API calls, data flows, events, everything's going to be done through Ion Desk. Okay, and Ion Desk allows us to do all of those connection types. All right. With the Ion workflow, we can connect to outside systems. We can connect to our own systems. We can connect to third parties. We can connect to third-party emails, text messaging, SMS texting, portals, our portals. So we can connect to anything. But if you are a cloud subscriber, so if you do deploy the application as a cloud solution, as a SaaS solution, these connections will actually be set up for you. So connection points between depending on your SKU list, right? So whatever you bought or you use and license, those will be done for you by SaaS Ops. So it would already be set up. So if we're talking about an on-premise or a hosted solution, some of this you might have to go through the configuration guides and get some of this set up yourself. But it's relatively simple. They're just, especially with inside CSI, with inside Infor. So you'll notice here we have one for Factory Track. It's a connection point. My different sites like London and so forth. I do have EQ, CPQ, but I don't have that one turned on. And you'll just see some other ones. This instance here is Mingle, the social. So that's how we're integrated between Mingle and CSI. Right, and just a lot of other ones. You can connect to EAM, Infor Expense Management. I have set up XM. So that's kind of how the connection points. So we're not going to talk about much more in that because that's that's kind of set up. You set it up, you're done. If you need to connect later, we won't talk much about API flows today. That gets a little deeper, but I will hit a few points on them. And then data flows. And the data flows really, when we think about passing documents, so when I say a document, what is a bot or what is an XML document? Well, I just, in layman's terms, it's information. So we're going to pass data, information between multiple systems and tell the other system then what to do with it, right? And then pass back parameters inside of that. So for XM, for example, I have this set up for CSI DAOs to expense management, which is the application Infor PRD, Infor XM. And we have documents inside of that say this is an outbound document that just basically says, what are we working with? Well, we're working with production, we're working with employees and so forth. And then nothing else. And then it comes back and we say, okay, what are they going to pass back from XM to CSI? And in this case, the example is they can send an expense report and an employee timesheet. So if you're using XM, right, we're just telling it, okay, what do we want to keep in sync? Because that way we don't have to go create employees and everything inside of that application. And then also anything that we want to pass back, in this case, we're passing back an actual report data, timesheet data, right? And then it populates where we need it to within inside the application. So what I want to start with is monitors. So a monitor can really be anything that you want to track. And it can be everything from just knowing when a transaction happens, like a GL at a high value got put in, pretty much anything you can think of in CSI or external applications that you actually want to monitor. We can monitor EAM, XM, right? So if we have an expense inside of a project in CSI and we're using expense management, maybe we can notify that no expense receipt's been put in there, because you can actually look for events that haven't happened. So there's policies you can set up to say, okay, this hasn't happened. It's supposed to happen as my business rule, right? And I need to notify somebody. So we'll see some of that as I go through some of these templates. Monitors will flow into alarm templates, which we'll talk about, and then workflow. So a monitor isn't a workflow, all right? It's just a notification or an alert, depending on how you want to see it. And it can be sent through email, it can be sent through text, it can be sent right into the portal, which is our in context. You can see it on widgets inside the homepage, which we'll look at as well. I always say this though, we get a lot of emails already. So when you are getting set up right, you don't really want to monitor everything in the world. And I think you'll see that alarm templates will help with that. That way you can set up templates and just have people monitor what they choose to, and not generally everything, but ECNs or a purchase requisition, those things we might want to do. Now, inside of a monitor, we can kick off a workflow inside of the task that's been submitted. So we'll see how that works. But let's just kind of go through one, just basically high level, because I really want you to understand this really is not development. There is scripting that you can do in here, but mostly you're just filling out parameters and the attributes and the rules, and it's pretty straightforward. There's only couple hitches that might get you, but if you've used CSI for a while, it shouldn't be a big deal. So we can create this as whatever we want. And the first thing we're going to do is really look at what documents are out there. So what is it that we want to work with? Okay? And these are pretty straightforward. The BODs are all really named generically. So this is one of the parts that you kind of have to understand the mapping in. There is a document that you can download called CSI business events that trigger business rules that trigger events. So it will tell you like, okay, what's asset master, right? Well, that's our fixed assets. What's accounting chart? Well, that's our chart of accounts, right? What's our party master? Well, that's going to be customers. So it is a little odd because, since they connect to almost every ERP system that Infor has, they just have generic names for the basic things that you would use. Okay, so. But if I wanted to use purchase order, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. We can also do references. So if there's a connection point that we know set purchase orders, but maybe I also want to see purchase order receipts, right? So maybe I want to see a connection between the two because I know that that table, that IDO holds other things, right? So or shipments and customer orders, or cash receipts and accounts receivable, whatever. So you really just have to think about what is it that what kind of transaction we want to link, and I'll show you how we do that. So add, again, kind of weird, but it's called receive delivery. And then the references allow us to create connection points. So if it already knows what's connected, it already understands that reference. So that's already in there. So we're good. But if I had other connection points that it didn't understand between the two, so how am I referencing it? What makes that a unique situation? So in this case, I've created that. So it's an intelligent mapper on the key fields. So attributes are really just fields. And this is the other part that kind of, at first you'll kind of have to think through a little bit, but inside of that document that we just defined, the receiving delivery, you'll notice is up here, and then the purchase order BOD. And inside of here is all kinds of stuff this is stuff that sits inside of CSI. So this could be all your fields that are mapped inside CSI. And these are just action codes, action pieces that you need sometimes to pass between so that ION understands what's going on. Like the accounting entity, if you have multiple sites and you want to just have transaction events happen in one site, you're going to want to pass the accounting ID, which is one of your sites, right? So you only want it in a certain site, not in another. All right, so that's what these are. So if we go down, we're just really putting in what the information is. So maybe I want the total amount. And let's see, I also want PO number, ID. I also have the document date and time. So we'll see how to use that. So we'll do that. And then I want to grab something in receiving. I think I want to grab open quantity. So what I'm doing here is setting up, what are the fields that I want to interact with. Yeah. I might be using them to display in a message. I might be using them to use as parameters for other things that you'll see when we get to the condition rule. So it's really going to be anything, even if you're not going to display it in the message, but you need it in terms of, you're going to evaluate something against it, then you need to throw that in as well. And for some reason, my two other ones didn't get in there. So let me finish that. Total amount ID. Right, stick with that. Okay. I don't know. We need create too, don't we? And I'm going to use the create the document date for an escalation. You'll see in just a few here. Okay. So that's really what you're doing. You're just setting up what are the attributes. So what are we using, which is what are the tables and fields that we want to interact with. Right. Then we can come in and create the conditions. So we have multiple types of conditions. We have just a value comparison. So I can just say, I want to compare the quantity on hand or the total amount to a value. So I want to look for anything that has a total value over $10,000, right? That's going to give me that comparison. You can do comparisons with calculations, so you can put in a formula, right? So if there wasn't an extended value, but of course there is, or you could say, I want to know if there's been any purchase orders put in where the line count is over 50. It's a lot of POs, something like that. Or a receiving day where I have on my PO receiving list, I have more than 100 lines on my PO receiving list, something like that. Deviations, so that's a pretty good one where you can set up and say, I don't need to be notified on every purchase order, but if the purchase order is more than 25% in receiving quantity or value cost, then I want to notify, right? We have date time checks, and then an attribute existence. So this is the idea of something being there or not. So if we go back to the example of expense management, right? We say, so you put in, let's say an SRO or project expense, and you need to through XM attach a receipt. Well, that hasn't happened. So you're basically looking out there for, is that even existed? So it would be some sort of a status, or it would be a 1 and a 0, like a yes, it's happened, no, it's happened. So that's what the existence does. So in this case, I'm just going to do an attribute comparison. Type. And we're just going to compare the open, actually, I'm going to do the total amount is greater than or equal to, and we can do the open quantity, or we can come in and just do a hard value. Just do, so just do, right. Could be any value. This is where the template you'll see is a little bit different in that this value is really the parameter. So what happens is I can set this thing up and say, I'm not going to set it up with a value. I'm going to let each user who has access to that go in and say, well, I only want to be notified of this. So maybe the controller, if it's $10,000, I want to know about it. If it's the purchasing manager, maybe they don't. If it's over 100 or 500 or 1,000, they want to be notified. So everybody gets their individual kind of event. So that's what we're doing there. We can also do multiple. So we can do if this, then and that. So it can be and conditions and or conditions. So we can combine things together. So for example, the PO receipt example. So it has a PO hasn't been entered, but you might have a condition that says, okay, I just need to be notified of that within 2 days of the transaction happening, right? I don't need to know immediately. We'll give them a couple days, and if they haven't put it in, another example of that is not clocking out, right? So you can do factory track. You can link to that and say, okay, so if I have a non-clock out, but it's after the grace period, the transaction's after the grace period, then I want to know about it, something like that. Again, we're just doing a condition only. Document overdue is what we just spoke of. It's like that XML file hasn't been passed, right? So when we do an event like a receiving event in CSI, it uses the replication management to send the BOD, right? The correct BOD for the purchase receiving. So if that is overdue by a time limit, like it hasn't that event hasn't happened, then I need to be sending my alert, and then a value change. And this is where I could say, well, if the PO cost has changed, I need an alert on that. So if somebody's gone in and changed the total value on a PO, I want to be notified. And that's really good for like ECNs. Gives you you can set up what the change was and what it is going to. Okay. And then that's a good example of where I might kick off a workflow. So I might have a workflow here at the end that says, okay, so it's an ECN that's been entered. If it's just, let's say, for example, if it's just a drawing change that doesn't affect the bill of material and Cloud Suite, then I just need to do it, assign it to myself, and close it. I'm done. But if I need other people to look at it because maybe it's a quality issue or it has backwards compatibility for inventory, or I need to create an ECN, I can kick off a workflow at that point, which then will follow whatever approvals and things that you need. Yeah. But I'm going to say just the condition, which is what we created over there. That's the amount. Okay. And then we have some things. When do I want to know? So alert each time that happens, or maybe just alert me once in every day or once in a week. So this way we're not getting just bogged down by tons and tons of the transaction happening or not happening, especially with the missing document, right? The document exists. We don't want to be pinged on that every time it refreshes. We want to be pinged on that like daily. And what happens with these is you'll get a summary email, which I'll show you when I get to Outlook piece. That'll tell you here's all of the list of events and tasks and everything that's happened in that period. Say that hello. Okay. So what is it that we want to do? We want to say this is where we can use the formatting of the different aspects of defining a field that's inside the attribute. Now you do have to call it the same attribute, but and if you want a pop-up of that, keyboard, it's that. So let's do where the so I could do received, or I could do, since I'm looking at PO, I could do entered. So whatever it is here that we want to say, right? So whatever it is that we want to display in our content and our notification, so the alert comes up. Distribution, fairly simple, right? Who do I need to send this to? Simple is going to be simple. We're going to go in and select these things. Now, if you're not a Mingle user today, these are something that you'll have to set up. So inside of Mingle, you set up your users in the IFS, and so when you do that, you can create different groups. So I have groups in here for planning, operations. I think accounts receivable. I have a PO requisition approval just specific to that. So you can set up any groups that you want and manage it that way. That way you're not necessarily having to go into each workflow and change a user, right? If that person leaves or if it changes, right? You just want to use the groups and then manage the group policy inside of Mingle, right? So we've got a bunch of people there. So let's do purchasing right there. And then I can also say, also distribute it to the manager of that group. So send it to me, but also send it to my manager. And again, that manager hierarchy and that type of stuff is set up in Mingle as well, if you want to use that feature. Drillbacks, well, those are what you would expect them to be. They are, if you want content inside of your alert or email to be able to open up CSI and view the record, then you want to create a drillback. So it's going to be pretty much any list inside of, let's do sightline views. And then we can say, okay, well, what do I want to link back to? And I'll do supplier. And then you can come down here and fill out the values, and then kind of mapping between the attributes that we already said, right, are in there, and then the value that we want out of the ERP system. So we're just kind of mapping, you know, what it is that we want to drill back into. And it could be any of the attributes. So this again is when you're designing it, you want to think about when you create the attributes, well, am I going to have drillbacks that aren't necessarily going to be in my alert? Pretty simple here. We can go in and create events, and you can pretty much see there's all kinds of reminders and escalations. So you can set it up to remind the person again. So, you know, QC or an RMA comes in, and I just notify them every morning that there's still an open RMA that you need to go evaluate. Or I can set it up to be based on creation date, time after the due date. So it was supposed to be done Monday, but on Wednesday or 3 days after, I want to be notified. And then again, values that you want, or an attribute. Units of time if we're just doing that. So I won't do anything there. And then this is where we could come in and say, okay, I would like to start the workflow from an alert, and maybe that alert would be I'll do some of those. Okay. And then we would put in our attributes here as to what it is that we're, oops, that's melting. That should be null. It's for all. So you just basically go in again and say, what do I need? Because the workflow that's already been set up when we go set one of those up, they have attributes, right? And some of them are required. So it's an input value. So what is it that I have to know or see in the workflow to kick it off, right? Because there might be some things that we need to know about. If there's not, then you can just kick it off. But basically what it's going to do then is it's just going to schedule that to be kicked off, and now it goes into whatever the workflow is. Okay. Okay. So that's it, and we click the go button, and it will tell me if there's any problems. Right? So my due date wasn't configured as a correct type. I think I didn't pick date, so it's probably integer or something. And then I selected on that, and I need to delete that. So it should take care of one. And my attribute, yeah, so date time. That's going to be decimal, not decimal. Okay. And you can do filters and those kind of things here as well. Okay. Once we're good to go, we can activate it. And anything that's activated, right, you'll see active. You can also follow those through active monitors. So anything that's kicked off or out there. Right? So that's basically what it is. I have a few that I use for other purposes, but requisitions, shipments, you can really think of all kinds of stuff that's critical and important to you all. And we want that event to kick something off. Now, we get a little more sophisticated in workflows, but the good point here is that most of what I did in the monitor is also very similar to the workflow. There's just a few other things that you need to do. So going through that very, very slowly, but those types of things will happen. What is the notification? Who does it need to go to? And alarm templates, I won't build one. I just have a couple, but the one that I have in there is inventory adjustment. And I just have it set to say inventory, if the inventory adjustment is over a certain value. And you'll see that show up in my template. And now workflows. So workflows can be sent or started, let's say, from, well, a lot of places. An external API, so where I might have a purchase requisition from EAM, or an external, like maybe you use Concur expense management and you need to know when something's happened there. So you could create an API connection and point it from there. You can do it manually. You can schedule them. So you can schedule a workflow, maybe at the end of the month it needs to do a certain thing, maybe notify people of reconciliation events, such like that. You can kick them off inside of CSI by the event, obviously. You can also kick them off by the monitor that we talked about, the alert or the monitor. And pretty much, and I did say outside an application. So lots of different ways that we can kick off the workflows. And then I guess I need to mention activation policies as well. So another way that we can kick off a workflow to just work for a particular event, we can set up an activation policy, which is just basically a rule that says, okay, when this happens, then I want that workflow to go. So you might say, well, why, it doesn't make sense. Why don't you just put that in the workflow? Well, the reason is because activation policies can have multiple workflows off of them, right? Perhaps. So new item creation, right? Maybe the activation policy is a new item's been entered, but I have two different workflows. I have one that goes to purchasing so they can fill out all their information. I have one that goes to planning to do other things, right? So I can send it off. That way I don't have to keep putting that policy in every single thing that I do. So I just have a simple one here that I'll show in the widget. This is just an approval time off. So if somebody goes into the employment self-service or through FactoryTrack or any of the application places that you can do this and request time off, it will notify the manager of that person. And then it will wait until that's been approved. Either you accept it or reject it. And we'll see how that works here in a second. But I want to go through more of a larger. Okay. So here, all I want to do real quick is just show the ease of it, and then also what these mean, right? So just some things that I'd like to highlight so that you know. I'm not going to go through each of these elementary style, but at least you know kind of some of the stuff that can be done with workflows. So these are either notifications, so I can drop in a notification, which is just basically that. And that's essentially like what we did in the monitor. So I'm going to say, what's the message? What data points do I want to put in it, if I want any, and then also who it goes to. So pretty simple there. Then you have tasks and task chain. So a task is pretty simple, right? I just need you to say yes or no, you approve it or you don't approve it, or you're done, or you've assigned it to yourself, whatever it is that the task needs to be. But the task chain then allows you to have these multiple events that go on. And it could be multiple people. So different ways to use that would be multiple conditions. So if it's over 10,000, I need it approved by the manager and the controller. If it's over 50,000, I need it to be another level. So all three people, including the CEO, have to approve it or something like that. So that's a chain event. You can have voting, if 2 out of 3 people say yes, then, then you're good to go. So you can create that chain of approval, and you can actually do it pretty sophisticated with business rules and matrices. So you can build an approval matrix, which I have down here at the bottom. Pull that up. And I'm basically saying over 1,000, purchasing needs to say it's okay, and over 10,000, then it goes to finance group and they have to say it's okay. Right? You can also create business rules. So you can create any kind of expression building logic that you want that has to happen for all those parameters to pass or fail or a certain amount. And that way we can have a pretty sophisticated approval process if we're doing that. Passing parameters, decision tables, that would be more like a matrix of skill set, right? So if I say these work centers require these skill sets, and I have an operator that's not in that matrix on that work center, I need to be notified, something like that. ION API, so that's where if we need to go out and pull that from another application, either from or to or both. Wait time is wait, start workflow. This can kick off other workflows, but this is the kind that can either you can set it up to be if you need to kick off another workflow, or just automatically kick off another workflow. Now, one of the really cool things, a couple of them, is loopback, and loopback then lets you create a yes/no condition and then loop it back anywhere in the chain, right? And so if you want to say, well, I need more information, so now it's got to go all the way back to PO submitted or whatever you're doing with that. So it's just looping back in the process based on a condition. And then sub-process. So what a sub-process is a repeatable task. So you can create a workflow that's pretty repeatable that you do like maybe every month end, and then you can embed that in different workflows outside of that. So you don't have to recreate that same workflow over and over, and you can just put a sub-process in. So it's basically, as I go along, yeah, and I'm going to repeat this workflow that I already know that I use, or define it here. And then Coleman, we haven't talked much about that, but Coleman Digital and Coleman AI are the two artificial intelligence, so the digital assistants. That's just basically, you give it skills to do stuff, and then it executes or asks questions or whatever the case is. And then the AI is pretty cool, pretty sophisticated, but it's where you can set up logic and rules and does machine learning and that kind of stuff. So you can kick off tasks for Coleman to do as well, which are more automated. And the other thing that we can kick off here would be a process inside AES. So that's another thing that comes up a lot of times, like, well, how am I using this in parallel? Well, certainly if I have an event in AES and CSI that kicks off, it may also kick off a workflow. But AES is obviously more powerful. It can suspend records, it can lock records, it can change records, right? It can do a lot of things that this workflow notification couldn't do without extra work. So in a lot of cases, like let's say if you do have, an ECN approval, well, that's great. I notified somebody and I have this great workflow, but you know what? I want to send it to AES and kick off the event that then holds the job, let's say, or the current material, so nobody can change it until it's been approved or something of that nature. Item master fields, you can go down to the field level, whatever the case is. So the AES is used more when I want to actually have something happen in the application, and then I can interact with that, either passing data to and from. Okay, so that's how they work together. Okay. So all this great stuff, how do we know? Oh, wait. So all this great stuff, but how do I get notified, right? So that's where we have multiple ways that we can target people, basically. So we can say, well, let's do it in a simple email, right? So we'll go through the email that's set up as the Mingle user. We can do it through the standard Mingle inbox. So with inside Mingle, we also have an inbox that can be synced with your inbox in CSI if you're using that. All right, so it can go there. It can go to the actual portal. We call the portal, which is the alerts, tasks, posts, notifications. And there's 3 ways that you could view those. You can view them right here, obviously. So if I click on these, I will go in and see a list of information that's there. So these are all my alerts that I've been notified by. So this torsion spring 1,000 was put in. I had a quantity, or 1,000 is 1,200, right? So this is all my alerts, okay? And I can show the details. So I can look at it a little bit more. And if I had those drillbacks built in, then I can go in and view information about that. Also attachments if there were any. So I want to be alerted of any purchase order that has a drawing attached, whatever, right? So any attachments through IDM would link in there as well. Okay. And then you can assign, and that's really the great part about tasks and alerts. So think of it like a quality check queue. QC receiver comes in through, let's say, in process, and I don't know who's necessarily going to work on it, maybe from the quality department, or an MRR has been entered, and I don't know who's going to have time to look at, take that, or even who might have a skill set. So that can be assigned, and you'll see here in a minute when I do the task widget that you can assign it to others, which is, that's pretty cool, right? I'll just attach stuff to other people. So if I go through posts, all of those things exist here. They also exist in context. So if I'm inside of CSI, and I'll just go to like items. Do QC items. Man, scroll's not working today. There it is. And by the way, I get asked this sometimes. No, you can't use the smart one-click client inside of Mingle. So you'll have to use the web client. So if you're not using that today, it's coming sooner or later. So I would get used to it. They pretty much have everything that you can do, including all the development tools, or pretty much all the development tools already done. But anyway, so I can see my tasks and my alerts in context as well. So I can have this ribbon that's there, and it will prompt me if I have a task or if I have an alert that prompts up. So it's the same data, right? It's just a different way to look at it. You can also just set it up to be scheduled to give you an update in your email periodically, weekly, daily, if it's not things that you really need to be notified of immediately. Okay. So I'll pull that over here, a few minutes. So here's an example. I had 2 alerts and 5 unassigned tasks sitting there. So this is a reminder, summary reminder that I've set up. And then you can see them in the emails themselves, obviously. So pop that out over here. So Dave Daniels, QC receiver, I think I have one of those. QC receiver 295 needs reviewed, right? So this is a task, and it's going to sit in my task list until I do something with it. And then I can put the drillbacks in here if I want. By the way, yes, you can create all the email. You can create customized email templates. You don't have to have Infor in the corner of yours. You can really create it however you want, put the data on it. It's much simpler than if you've done that, tried to do that inside of AES. Kind of a bear, but inside of CSI, it's pretty straightforward, or inside of ION, it's pretty simple. So you can create the template to be whatever it is that you want, maybe make it different, especially if it's going to be external. So if you're using it for external, like suppliers, customers, and they can be included as well inside of workflows and monitors, quite honestly. You just have to set up an external user in Mingle, and that way it has the correct permissions, so you're not going to get hacked and everything. But you set that up, and then you can send it to like a distribution list that is in the customer document profile. Let's say just snag that parameter and send it to a customer weekly statements, something like that. Right. And the last place that we're going to see it is here. So this is a home page. That I just throw on here, for example, of different widgets that we can use to have notifications. Right? So if I come in, we can see all different kinds of ways that we can look at this stuff. We can have the status of what's going on. This is my alert list. Here's my quick widget for inbox. Here's how many flows have been started. So you can manage flows and you can kick off flows. So the example here, I can come in and say, I know that I want to kick off a particular workflow and I'm authorized to do it. So I want to do that and I want to go ahead and run it, right? So I can start flows from inside the widget. The workflow viewer is a pretty nice feature because that will show us where things are, where things are. So what happens is these are interchangeable. So if I click on any of the workflows in any of my other widgets, my workflow viewer will prompt and it will show me where it's at, where it's being held at. I can drill into the details, and even if it's very, very large, you can work with this interface. So this is really nice because you can see where it is, if it's held up or if somebody's not reacting to it. Okay. So that gives us the ability to drill down into some of that. My alarms up here. So this was a custom alarm that I had, but if I want to create another one, I can go in and say, okay, what are my conditions for that template? And I want to know if the quantity, right, and then I can create is greater than 50, right, or whatever. So when we did those monitors, basically an alarm is the same thing. It's just that instead of all the attributes filled out, you put in what attributes you would like the user to fill out. And you can do that through the application like this, or you can do it in, we have Ion alarms that you can download natively from the App Store. So there's Infor Mingle and there's Infor alarms, and then users can do that right on their device. So a controller can go in at any time. They wake up in the middle of the night sweating that this capital equipment's going to be approved and they're not sure how you can pay for it. They can go in and say, I just need to see when this purchase order comes in or when the invoice gets matched in vouchers or whatever. The task manager is a nice widget because that is where you get some control. That's where you can actually assign and manage the tasks. Now, this would only be given right permissions to certain security rules, but the idea here is I can go in and add another user. So I could add somebody that's not in the workflow, but I'm going to tell them to go assign it to them or ask them to look at this. I can assign it to myself, or I can assign it to somebody else. So in the case of an engineering backlog, maybe for design or something for projects, maybe the manager assigns it based on who has the skill set, whatever. Okay, and then you can also view that task down here, just the same as we could with the workflow. So the task manager is pretty nice. You can assign things to different people. And we have some statuses and other things. And the last piece is, so if I'm using all of these things, the monitors, workflows, events, activation events, right? There's a lot of stuff in there. But IonDesk is nice for that because the home will tell you immediately if there's any issues. And I do have 111 BODs that have failed for whatever the reasons are. But I get to see it automatically. So how many running instances I have workflows. Maybe a workflow's been sitting out there for a certain time and I need to shut it off. And then if you want the real detail, you go into one view, and one view is the guts of it, and it tells you what's been passed within a certain time frame. Oh, come on. This is one downside to working from my home internet. Bear with me. Well, when it comes up here. We can basically set up and say, okay, I want to see every document that's been passed. There we go. Beautiful. Last 24 hours. So this gives us the ability that if something fails, if a BOD fails, or if I can't figure out why an event isn't kicking off and that error is in there, then I go down and I search the documents, and I shouldn't have done 24 hours. That was loud. So what it's doing is it's sending out notifications back and forth to say, okay, I need to do these things. So there's a sync item master, for example. So if we go into that, it's going to show the actual communication between the applications and where it's at, where it failed, anything like that. Now this was handled, obviously, so it's not going to have any failures, but oh my goodness, I think my kids are watching Netflix. Wonderful. It'll come up here in a second. But it's just basically a workflow. So you can see kind of just like we saw with a standard workflow, you're going to see the internal workflow that says, okay, I passed this document to EAM, but it didn't receive it for whatever the case is. So you would see it error out there. And then you would just go troubleshoot whatever that issue might be. Okay, so it's going to keep track of every single interaction between other systems. And that's why I say it's kind of nice that you know, if you have a lot of multiple applications that you connect to, you might want to look at using Ion to do so, because not only do you have one place to do it, but you can also create API flows. And an API flow is the idea of being able to have one event that orchestrates or passes data to multiple. So let's say I have 3 systems. Well, I'm integrating to 3 systems. I've got to do 3 calls, and I got to do 3 authorization calls every time, right? Well, you can use an Ion API flow to create that just once. So I'm going to take these parameters, I'm going to take these authorizations, and then I'm going to send it out to one or multiple other applications. So now I really only have to write my business rule once, and then I can connect to outside solutions that way. So for single sign-on, let's say if you had Concur Expense Management, Salesforce CRM, you wouldn't have to connect to both of them through an API. You would connect to an API flow that could then pass whatever parameters need to be passed to each of those. And then they'll send the data back and then back in where it needs to go in the application. So just some oh yeah, here we go, okay. So this tells you kind of where it's at, what happened. So the message entered Ion, it cannot be routed. So this was a problem. Where it's used, what the problem is, what the document is asking for. So document ID, message ID, DAO's location, all that good stuff. So you can track it down, basically figure out what's wrong, why it failed. So in this case, I have a no route, so it doesn't know what to do with it. It's sending it to CSI and it doesn't know what it's supposed to manage. And there's a lot more we could talk to, but that's all I have for an hour. Did any questions pop up, or is there anybody that has any basic questions to fire away?
There are no questions in the chat or the Q&A. I could, since we've got a smaller audience, I could unmute all lines. So if you have a question, please chime in.
Yeah, and while everyone's kind of thinking or deciding to come off mute, we don't have a lot of CSI clients using all of this. There are a lot, especially not just from Guide, but through Infor. But just remember, this is, I always like to say, this is the Reese's peanut butter. It's the chocolate and the peanut butter. There's always been peanut butter, there's always been chocolate. You put them together, right? So this has been working with M3, EAM, and a lot of other applications that Infor uses for many years. Okay, so this is all technology that works. People use it every day in their businesses, just the way we kind of went through it, but they might be using a different application. So this isn't like well, is there only 2 CSI clients that use this? Well, no, but there might be 2, but there might be 10,000 M3 clients who use it. So I just want to make sure we understand that this is technology that's been out there for a long time. This isn't just something new that they put in for CSI. Okay, I'll stop.
Well, if anybody has a question, please ask it. Otherwise, I think that will conclude our webinar for today. The webinar is being recorded, and a copy of that will be distributed to all the people that are registered for the session today. So if there are no questions, thank you very much for your time and your attention. Thank you, Pat, and everybody have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Be safe.